So earlier this week, I got the news that HP and Precision Proco have announced that they are collaborating to supply books to children whose lives have been disrupted by the war in Ukraine. And to talk about that, I'm happy to be here with Ashley Gordon. She's the publishing segment manager for HP PageWide. Thank you, Ashley, for coming to my show and helping us understand how this technology is benefiting people, not just in Ukraine, but around the world. The first question that I would have is, can you explain in simple terms how HP's printing technology is making it possible to quickly produce these dual language books for Ukrainian children? And how does this differ from traditional book printing methods?
Sure. Well, first off, thank you, Alex, for having me. I appreciate your interest in this incredibly important topic and the time that we can spend on it. So, yes, how did HP's technology contribute and make it possible to do this? So, Precision Proco, the print partner for Pineapple Lane, which was the publisher for these beautiful books, uses HP's inkjet and Indigo technology to be able to respond very quickly to when these books can get to the children. In a situation like Ukraine, we have to be able to quickly print, package, and distribute the books when there are volunteers available, because for this particular project, the books were being taken into Ukraine and distributed to libraries and schools where they could then be given to children. So we don't always know far in advance exactly when the books will be able to go. And what Precision Proco can do with the flexibility of the HP technology is to print one, to print 25, to print 500 or a few thousand, all economically, all very quickly. And so when these projects, when the funding comes along, when the partners are available, then Pineapple Lane can connect with Precision Proco, get the files to them, get the books printed, and then we can respond exactly when the resources are available. So it's really the combination of the technology providing the high quality color printings. These are beautifully illustrated full color children's books, and the quick production in a wide variety of quantities that makes this possible. And that is different from traditional offset production or litho production, where you have a minimum number of of copies that you would need, several thousand to make it economical. So this flexibility and speed is what really makes makes the project work.
This project seems to have a strong humanitarian focus, especially when we're talking about displaced children that are not just in Ukraine, but some other parts of the world. How does HP see the role of technology in addressing social issues and helping communities in need through all of these challenges?
So HP's social impact goals include bridging the digital divide, but also demonstrating the real value of print and how print materials support education and embracing digital technology. And so far, through this dual language program, we've actually contributed more than 40,000 books to this Ukrainian effort. As you say, for children in Ukraine, we've been there at the Ukrainian border when they pass into Romania with books for them, and then also for resettled children in the UK and other places in Europe. And particularly the dual language program is part of the value, because when they are moved to a new culture, it is a challenge for them to maintain the connection to where they came from, while they're also bridging a community that is unfamiliar to them. So the fact that these books are illustrated by Ukrainian illustrators, they're written by well-known Ukrainian authors, makes them very familiar to these children. By having them also be translated into English, it provides that bridge to their new community. And we had a wonderful story about a young girl who was in a school in the UK, and she was the only Ukrainian in the school, the only Ukrainian, obviously, in her class. And she was very, very quiet and very reserved. And it was difficult for the teacher to connect with her. And when these books were distributed to the classroom, she, we're told, just completely lit up, completely changed, was able to use those books as a means of sharing her experience with her fellow classmates, but also her classmates could read the book and then see her as just another child, just like they are. So for HP, it is the power of print and how having that book in their hands really makes the difference. And then also recognizing the challenges that these particular children are facing through leaving their country or having their lives disrupted. We want to make sure that these are culturally relevant books that support where they come from and the lives that they've lived.
Speaking of children and cultural relevance, Ukraine has only been a separate country for a few decades, and part of the efforts that are being done in there are, for example, related to things like road signs and manuals and government documents and so on. How do you see the role of technology in helping transition into their own language and to bridge that gap between the old and the new?
So part of this project, we funded the production of these new books, but we also provided funds through the nonprofit partner Book Aid International and PIN Ukraine to buy books from Ukrainian publishers. So it underscores the value of the Ukrainian culture and undergirds their own publishing industry. Technology allows the Ukrainians to express through their own production of their own stories and history, the to more ingrain what is uniquely theirs, and that's true in all of book production and book publishing. It is truly giving a voice to those individuals and representing their culture at large. So by having these printed products that again are written by Ukrainian authors, illustrated by Ukrainian illustrators, and then also produced in Ukraine itself, it strengthens their identity and it continues it beyond just today. As we all know, books are built to last. So they'll be there for decades to come.
For our listeners who may not be familiar with digital printing, could you share examples of how the flexibility of HP's technology might benefit, for example, local businesses or organizations in places like my native Panama, or maybe even help local indigenous communities who also want to preserve their identities and do it in an economical way?
Sure, that's a great question. And what we've been talking about is some larger runs, right? We were talking in the thousands for these children. But the beauty of this technology is that it economically and can print a single copy at the same level of quality. So if you were to create a project for that required customization or personalization to allow the child to put their own name in a book, for example, or for a business, we're not talking about children necessarily, but to create marketing materials that are specific to their recipient. This technology is viable for that single copy so that each child can see themselves reflected in that book. Each business could be targeted where the language and the messaging is specific to its recipient, all the way up to the several thousands of copies. So what it does for a business is allows them the flexibility to serve a multitude of applications and a wider variety of publishers of customers than if they only had that large offset requirement, that offset equipment.
Speaking of flexibility, we've come a long way from movable type and setting and typesetting and all of that. You also mention in your story that it reduces waste by printing only what's needed. How does this on-demand printing approach benefit the environment in an industry, the printing industry, that is usually associated with high cost because of things like waste and other byproducts?
So it does so in two ways. In the traditional publishing industry, there has always been the problem of returns, of over ordering, of overprinting, and then much of those books that come back are pulped. Estimates range from 20 to 30% of a book's print run will ultimately pulp. So that's a tremendous waste and a significant impact on the carbon footprint of the industry. What digital printing allows is not only can you print fewer copies at a time, you can print more frequently, and those print runs are able to be fulfilled very quickly. So it allows a publisher, rather than to print, say, 2 years worth of inventory, which is a complete guess that they then keep in the warehouse and then ultimately will probably pulp because they've overestimated. It allows them to print what they need in response to demand in medium quantities so that they're not pulping. That can go all the way to the other extreme of literally printing after the order has taken place. So print on demand would be the model that waits for the consumer order to happen, and then the book doesn't even exist until the consumer has already ordered it. So it completely eliminates over ordering and waste. And then the digital technology itself, because of the more efficient startup, because you are literally printing what you have, what you've ordered, it's much more efficient than offset in terms of just production paper waste at the beginning. You know, the press run, you're much faster in terms of how much paper is going through the system before you're actually printing the book. And at the same time, at the end, when you complete the print run, there's far less paper waste at the end of the print run. So both the technology and the individual runs has less waste than other traditional methods. And then the strategy that a publisher or a printer can use in fulfilling what they need and maintaining inventory and responding to sales demand is much more precise. So it's both the technology and the strategy of fulfillment that enable a much more sustainable solution to production.
Not just paper, but inks and storage and all of
Yes,
different.
everything.
Now,
Yeah.
many of our listeners are parents. How do you think initiatives like these, which provide culturally relevant books to children in such difficult circumstances, can impact a child's development and well-being?
Well, unfortunately, after our experience in the pandemic, there's been a great deal of research that indicated moving children to an online environment entirely was not to their benefit. There are tremendous gaps in learning that happened over the pandemic years. And there are actually initiatives, particularly in Europe, that are removing technology from the classroom and going back to the printed book. There's research that indicates that comprehension is improved when children work with physical content, that deep immersion experiences are possible when children are reading from a printed book as opposed to in an online environment. So what we want to help families and children and educators recognize and participate in is a return to giving children the option of both the physical and the online. We'll never put that genie back in the bottle completely. Obviously, there are tremendous benefits to our connectivity, to having a dictionary at your fingertips, to having an encyclopedia at your fingertips. So there is obvious advantage to where the technology has evolved. At the same time, what we learned during the pandemic is that print very definitely has a role to play, and it is integral to the learning experience, and especially for children and hands-on learning when they're young. So again, this technology, through its both economic sustainability and environmental sustainability, it allows us to maintain that connection to the printed word in a way that is both good for business and good for the environment and ultimately good for our children.
And the best part is you don't have to wait 2 or 3 years for the next print run of a new edition of a school book, which is what used
No,
to happen back in my day.
you don't have to wait for the new edition, and you can actually craft that edition that is regionally appropriate. And you can customize, you can regionalize, you can make that content, that educational content, exactly what that child needs. So we've got tremendous advantages over where we used to be.
That's great. I mean, it's really been very educational, and I hope to hear more about your efforts. Thank you. This has been Ashley Gordon, Publishing Segment Manager for HP PageWide. I hope to talk to you again soon for more information on all of these projects and hopefully one in Latin America as well.
Oh, that would be great. Thanks very much.